This is an incredible rare opportunity for me. How long after 1997 did the internal discussion start for a remake or an upgrade for Final Fantasy VII?
So, while I don't recall the exact year in which we started internal discussion for the remake series, I do remember that 2015 was when we initially announced the remake, and so the development for that started a bit before that. And so, going back then, also maybe 7 or 8 years before 2015, so around '07, I had talked to the scenario writer Nojima that we would like to have some of the story ready in the event that we start creating this remake series. And so there was something being formed at the time. So I would say, around 2010 or so, early 2010s, I think, we had already been working on this.
The 97 game is extremely old. When you're doing the remake series, it's now 3 games. Was it difficult deciding what stayed, what changed, what you wanted to keep, what you couldn't keep, maybe because times have changed or just mechanically didn't work anymore because the game was so old? Talk about that process of what you decided to keep and what you decided to change. And was it difficult?
When we approached the remake, we had thought that we wanted to create this without largely straying from the original storyline, was an initial thought. And furthermore, we wanted to incorporate elements from various spin-offs and related FF7 titles into this storyline. And so that was an initial concept as we approached this. And while that was our initial concept, we started with, we also felt that tracing the original storyline 100% as is would be quite unsatisfying to the players. And so we always wish to introduce these new elements, which can be seen in the remake series as whispers or Zack's storyline that is portrayed within Rebirth. And so in doing so, we wanted to offer a fresh experience for players going into this title.
As the game's director, was there any pressure on you living up to this game that has had multiple spin-off and has cemented itself into video game history? Any pressure on your end?
So while I would be lying to say that there was absolutely no pressure, I would also say that personally I had a ton of fun developing this game instead of feeling more of that pressure that you note. And I think this is really due to the fact that I myself was a fan of the original Final Fantasy VII, along with much of the development team, and we all had this in common, where the original FF7 title is very precious to our team, and this very much supported us throughout its creation as sort of our jump-off point and our perspective that we hold as creators. And so in that way, I believe we've been able to freely create going into Remake and Rebirth, and this leads to sort of the high quality of the game that we see here.
In Remake, Red 13 was not playable, but he was in the game, and in Rebirth, Vincent Valentine is not playable, but he's in the game. Just kind of creates some transparency. You have a lot of characters that do a lot of different things in that game, and it's very complex to design one and make one work. Why was Vincent Valentine put on the list for possibly the next game instead of Rebirth? Was it just too much work, too much constraint to try to fit him in, and you would rather put him in the next game? To talk about the decision behind him not being playable.
So looking at characters such as Vincent and Yuffie, which were more so optional characters in the original Final Fantasy VII, for remake series forever, from the get-go, we had wanted these characters to take more of a bigger role within the stories. As for the decision to make certain characters playable and others not in battle, when thinking of approaching this series as a trilogy, going from Remake, Rebirth, and now onto the third title, we wanted to ensure that the gameplay experience for each title is very much unique and there are new elements for the users to explore. And so in that way, it made sense for us to keep certain players, to keep certain characters to be non-playable and to leave them for the later titles to build that anticipation.
No, this game is a trilogy of games, one of the few to be made this way. I'm very curious about if you ever humored the idea of having your level and all your items carry over from Remake into Rebirth, and why you eventually decided on just starting over at level 1 again.
So for this, while we did take the format of a trilogy, we also wanted this to feel like a standalone experience for each individual title. So instead of having the save data and certain elements carry over exactly from the prior title, which would perhaps create more of an obstacle for new players looking to join the title from midway, we took to this route. And for the carryover, for people who do own some of the save data, we have rewards in the form of summon materia and such instead of carrying over the data.
What was it like expanding upon areas that were very small in the original game? Zack's Village, you could blink and miss it. Like, you could just completely bypass that section if you didn't realize it. But in Rebirth, it's expanded exponentially. You see a culture, you see an ecosystem, you see the materia reactor, you get to explore it. Like, what was it like expanding on those areas that were so small in Final Fantasy VII in 1997?
So when playing the original world map, on my own, I remember the sort of memorable feeling and sort of impact that it had on me back then. However, I do also recall that more so of the history and the worldview and details of each location and how it came to be was not represented at the time, and we would recognize them as ocean or desert or some type of landmass in such a way, but we wouldn't know much of the history or backstory on it. So when approaching Rebirth, we wanted to express this even further, and and answer the questions that players may have when looking into how was the Junon area, this locale, built into existence, and such. And so. In that way, we sought to, sort of establish the locations and in terms of explaining the worldview overall. And from there, we could dig in and say what kind of game content is appropriate and would be exciting for the users to discover at this place.
You learned a lot from Remake that you improved upon in Rebirth. What was your big takeaway from Rebirth that you took away for your next title? Biggest lesson, I guess.
So our biggest learning, I believe, was being able to sort of utilize this world map, and that now that users are being able to choose on their free will what to explore and which parts and how deeply they would like to go into. And this allows also for players to, discover the worldview in this way. And I think the way in which we presented this, which was much accepted for Rebirth. And for the third installment as well, we of course want to continue to allow this freedom of choice within the player's experience, and at the same time also create newness and continually evolve within the installment as well to provide a fresh experience for those as well. So, in also keeping this philosophy of the user's choice, I look forward to seeing, how we will arrange and sort of present this based on our learnings from Rebirth and being able to deliver this to our users.
As part of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth being up for Best RPG at the Game Awards, I imagine that many of the game's side activities helped factor into that nomination. With that said, did you ever expect players to be as captivated by Queen's Blood as they were?
So from the get-go, this was to be a game designed to have a vast number of mini-games, and within that, I knew that Queen's Blood was going to be something very solid and fulfilling for players. At the same time, getting this amount of requests to make this into a standalone mobile game was definitely a happy surprise for us.